Lebanon has a unique geostrategic location. It is a party to the Non-Proliferation Treaty and a non-nuclear armed state. Unfortunately, being in the Middle East means that it is riddled with tensions and conflicts as well as mistrust, and its population is aware of the cost of violence. Lebanon's leaders must endeavor to continue resorting to diplomatic efforts and to avoid it being dragged into a regional arms race. They must also continue pushing for the creation of a weapons of mass destruction free zone in the Middle East.
It's a moment for Kazakhstan as an emerging middle power to lead the global coalition against nuclear war. We should share our wisdom widely and engage more nuclear survivors and youth in this vital mission.
I think the memory of Hiroshima and Nagasaki have receded from the public consciousness over the past several decades. What lessons existed before are no longer at the forefront of these discourses surrounding nuclear weapons.
Remembering the historic event that transpired roughly 8 years ago, where Japan, specifically Hiroshima, they faced a nuclear bombing. We are saying our children should not incur the same history. History should not repeat itself. The world is a global village. We are ought to take care of each other.
In some ways, no, we haven't forgotten because people in Japan and across the world commemorate August 6th and 9th every year, and many groups and initiatives are passing down the testimonies of Hibakusha atomic bomb survivors, and many other groups are trying to create the conditions for a world without nuclear weapons, even if these have declined in salience. But in other ways, yes, we have forgotten because our vigilance on this issue has declined or faded in ways that allowed a third nuclear age to re-emerge with new nuclear uncertainties, dangers, and risks, and we need to find ways to remember more meaningfully.
While survivors like Hibakusha and nuclear detonations victims are alive, the remembrance will endure. However, as we're entering the post-survivors era, there is a risk that peace movements will fade eventually. That's why it's our imperative to educate the next generations about the realities and truths.
It is clear that for nuclear weapon states, they've been centering nuclear weapons as part of their military utility in order to ensure their security, relying on the notion of deterrence. However, what they forget to clearly elaborate on is the notion of risk that is associated with this strategy, particularly the risk of miscalculation, the risk of miscommunication. The risk of these associated factors is not commensurate with these states relying continuously on this strategy, as it can lead to potentially the end of human species.
Mutually assured destruction, or MAD, is not a valid or viable security doctrine because of its high proliferation danger as countries acquire more nuclear weapons. MAD also assumes that all actors are rational. However, there have been moments in history when nuclear war was averted by sheer luck, as miscalculations and accidents can occur.
I do not think that the NPT is still viable, but crucially, there is nothing fundamentally to replace it. The Treaty on the Prohibition of Nuclear Weapons, the TPNW, declares them illegal under international law, but does not provide a path or mechanism to compel states to disarm completely. For total disarmament to be achieved, expectations have to be met on several fronts, but without any treaty to replace the NPT or without major reform to it, the international community is left with few options.
I think a more interesting question is whether the NPT can live up to its promises in the 21st century. Given the evolving scale and complexities of today's challenges with the internet and new technologies and climate change, pandemics, and other issues, whether the NPT can adapt and become a platform where timelines and agreements and law enforcement mechanisms and monitoring progress towards disarmament can happen from that space? I think that's a more interesting question.
Realistically speaking, we are trying to build a nuclear weapons-free world that our children could grow up in. However, this is unlikely to be achieved in such a short time frame, mainly due to high distrust among countries, lack of diplomatic engagement, and deeply rooted mindsets justifying the need for nuclear weapons for deterrence purposes. That said, there will come a point in time when nuclear disarmament is achieved, mainly due to education, awareness, advocacy, as well as the emergence of alternatives to nuclear deterrence.
Yes, I think a world without nuclear weapons is possible, plausible, and within reach within my lifetime, and therefore within my children's lifetime. I believe that COVID reminded us that we have right now available to us a repertoire of political decisions that we can make if we interpret the environment as a crisis. As climate change becomes more entangled with nuclear weapons, I think we will be pushed to reassess not just what it means to be safe in the 21st century, but also what is possible to address this crisis.
Yes, the risk of nuclear war is quite real and often ignored. The nuclear armed states are blackmailing, attacking facilities, which can easily lead to nuclear annihilation. We must keep vigilant and advocate for nuclear justice and security.
It is clear that the risk of use or the threat of use are upon our doorstep, and it is a responsibility for us all to actively work and try to promote non-proliferation and have regressive measures to return back to rule-based order and respect of international law, and actually promote the abolition of nuclear weapons and what they represent.